Earlier this week, I went to see Lord of the Rings War of the Rohirrim. Let's talk about it. I went to see the latest Lord of the Rings movie, an animated Lord of the Rings movie. Lord of the Rings War of the Rohirrim. That was a lot of Lord of the Rings in just 1 minute. And now I did it again. Good God. I talked about it in this month's movie preview video. In case you missed that beautiful slice of YouTube content, go check it out. The link is below. Lord of the Rings War of the Rohirrim is a prequel to the famous Peter Jackson movies, including The Hobbit. It is actually set 200 years before the events in The Hobbit. Now, all of the Peter Jackson movies and that series on Prime, The Rings of Power, are all somewhat rooted in the work of J.R.R. Tolkien and his estate. This movie, however, is based on a small paragraph at the end of Lord of the Rings, in the annex. Tolkien just kind of quickly scribbled it in there. It tells the story of Helm Hammerhand, the legendary king of Rohan, and the namesake for Helm's Deep, the setting for one of the most pivotal battles in all of the trilogy. However, while Helm takes in quite a lot of screen time, the main character is actually his daughter, Hera. Now, a fun little detail, in that little scribble that Tolkien wrote about Helm Hammerhand and whatnot, Hera wasn't even mentioned. At least she didn't have a name. She was simply mentioned as his daughter. And to be fair, that kind of sets the tone for this whole story. Now, without giving away too much, Hera, as a woman in this whole Rohan society, finds herself to have very little impact in both the politics and the safekeeping of her people. Yet, she ends up becoming the one that saves the day by the end of the movie. A very familiar story arc, both for Lord of the Rings and Rohan, because Éowyn had that similar arc in the trilogy. But just in general, it is something that is very recognizable. Now, Rohan's biggest enemy at this point is Wolf, the son of one of the former tribe leaders and a childhood friend of Hera that basically cannot deal with getting rejected. That dude is the anime version of a raging toddler that is not getting his bar of chocolate. However, Wolf has an army. That toddler has nothing. Sorry. By the way, while we're talking about Éowyn, Miranda Otto, who played Éowyn in Peter Jackson's trilogy, reprised her role for this movie as a narrator. She kind of highlights parts of the story. And she's not the only one of the original cast returning. First off, Peter Jackson and his wife, Fran Walsh, are credited as executive producers. The writing partner, Philippa Boyens, is a producer on this movie and also helped with the script. And Dominic Monaghan and Billy Boyd, who played Meryn and Pippin in the trilogy, got to play 2 orcs in this movie, or voice 2 orcs in this movie. Now, you wouldn't be able to tell if you didn't know. On top of that, they used all of the trilogy's art direction, including the concept artists, Alan Lee and John Howe. And Howard Shore's soundtrack brings this movie to life. Trust me, that opening scene with that very familiar soundtrack, it hits home immediately. But sadly, that doesn't last long. Look, this is a very difficult movie to review for me personally. I've been a fan of Tolkien's work ever since I read those first books as a 12-year-old. I found them in my mother's cabinet and didn't put them down for years. I also loved all of the Jackson movies. Sure, one a little more than the other, but I tend to rewatch them once in a while. So there's a lot of nostalgia tied into this franchise for me personally. And I really like the work of the director, Kenji Kamiyama. It's not like I'm a big anime fan, but Ghost in the Shell, that is a classic. And it shows, because when it comes to the animation, this movie delivers. However, see, this is where it gets difficult, fighting that nostalgia. Apart from some really big, classic-feeling moments, the story kind of struggles. It is walking a thin line between the Tolkien lore and a more kind of fanfiction-esque story. And look, I don't think this could have been prevented if this had been a live-action movie. But the fact that it is anime did highlight some of those awkward moments. I think that is kind of typical for anime. It kind of highlights those extremes, if that makes any sense. For instance, punching a man to death with one single punch is a very anime thing. Not as much a Tolkien thing. And for people like myself that have seen everything and read everything Tolkien related, you can almost see the small pieces and patches that were used to stitch this story together. There's that classic arc of an army showing up at the most dire moment and saving the day, including the backlighting. An epic moment, but we've seen this before. There's the story of the king putting too much stock and trying to preserve his name. There's the rebellious daughter. There's the friend that sticks by your side no matter what. The list of borrowed puzzle pieces that make this movie is long. On top of that, there were just a lot of moments during this movie where I had to chuckle, and I was not the only one. I could hear other people in the room chuckle. And it wasn't necessarily a good type of chuckle. It was more of a, what the hell chuckle. Yeah, on the other hand, guys, seeing Helm's Deep again, and seeing that story unfold on how Helm's Deep actually got its name. Watching the end of the first line and the start of the second line of the Kings of Rohan. Because the second line actually ends in the trilogy with the death of Theoden. Seeing the eagles on their perch. Seeing Isengard before Saruman moved in. There's a ton of stuff, and it really does a great job of tickling that nostalgia bone. But I guess the gist of it is that it didn't really match my personal expectations for this movie, which is partly on me. And look, it's not like it's a bad movie, it has its moments. The cast does an amazing job. I mean, Brian Cox is the perfect voice for Helm. Gaia Weiss, Luca Pasqualino, Lorraine Ashburn aka Miss Andy Serkis. They all did an amazing job. The animation is gorgeous. The soundtrack feels like a warm blanket on a cold winter night. While the general arc is interesting, the actual execution and specifically the dialogues just fall flat. They are predictable. At times, they are even weird. I mean, who is that old lady in Helm's Deep? What am I missing? I actually think that might be an anime thing because anime tends to have an old witch lady just roaming around, asking weird questions, freaking everybody out.
Don't say that!
And I think there's more going on, something I missed. If you know, let me know in the comments. But if you haven't seen it yet, look, manage your expectations. And you might end up having a good time. And you know what? I might even watch it again on DVD or streaming. In the comfort of my own home. But tell me, have you seen it and what did you think about the movie? Let me know in the comments. Oh, and by the way, who is that old witch lady? Anyways, for now, that was it. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. It always helps me out. Maybe check out one of my other videos. And make sure to subscribe because I'm going to be back with a new video next week. Till then, take care of yourself, take care of each other. Bye bye.